Did you know that there are actually quite a few precut names that are trademarked? This is something that a lot of quilt pattern writers don't realize, and when they do realize, it can be a little bit of a cold ice water bucket down their neck, because all of these questions come up about whether or not they're allowed to use the terms. What if I'm using precuts in my quilt patterns? Can I refer to those in my quilt pattern? Am I going to get in trouble? I'm a small business. I don't have legal help. I don't have money to hire a lawyer, fight a legal battle. Like, all of these things come up and it can be very disconcerting. So this video is really to kind of lay a lot of that to rest. It's not what you seem, and I want you to be confident when you are writing and selling your quilt patterns that you're not going to get in trouble. You don't need to consult a lawyer for this. It's really not that complicated, but there is a ton of misinformation out there, especially in the quilting industry, and so we're going to try and lay a lot of that to rest today. So precuts that you might not realize the terms are actually trademarked are layer cakes, which are 10-inch squares, super popular precut. Honeymuns, which you may or may not have heard of, those are 1.5-inch strips, so kind of like a thin jelly roll. Of course, you have the jelly roll, super popular, dare I say one of the most popular precuts, 2.5-inch strips, and then turnovers, which I didn't even realize was a thing until I started looking into this a little bit more formally. Turnovers are 6-inch triangles. They're basically meant to make HSTs that are 5 inches, so they go with a charm pack essentially. So those are kind of the ones that are trademarked. Those are all owned by Moda. Moda is, as far as I know, the only company that actually trademarks these precut terms. And that's why if you've ever seen like a Riley Blake 10-inch square or, Island Boutiques or something like that, they're calling them like 10-inch carats or 10 carats or something like that, 10 stackers. There's all these kind of like weird names. That's because they're not legally allowed to use the term layer cake. Now, there are a few precuts that you might think are trademarked, but actually aren't. Charm squares are one of them. Any company can use the term tried squares. It's not trademarked, although a lot of companies still choose not to. Not really sure why that is, but there you have it. And then dessert strips, which is another kind of more obscure one that I think Moda has tried to trademark but not been successful with. Those are basically 6-inch wide strips of fabric, similar to a jelly roll, just wider. Those are not trademarked, so those are fair game to anyone to use. For a product or in a quilt pattern, we'll talk about kind of the cases which you can and cannot use these terms in a little bit. Now, before we dive in, I have to offer a little bit of disclaimer. I am not a lawyer. Even if I was a lawyer, I would not be your lawyer. So this video in no way, shape, or form can be legal advice. This is not a legal consultation. But what I am is a PhD level engineer, and I deal with intellectual property. I use it, I develop it constantly. That has a very high monetary value. And as a result of that, throughout my kind of corporate career, I've had a lot of training in IP law, trademarks, and patents and such. And so I'm going to kind of relay to you some of the things that I've learned in that process. And hopefully you find this helpful. So first of all, let's talk about what the heck a trademark is, what the point of it is, and then we can get into when you can and can't use it with regards to your quilt pattern. So first of all, trademarks are for brand recognition, right? And it's not really about the brand, right? The governments didn't invent trademarks, and they don't have this whole trademark office to help companies. They really don't give a crap about companies, to be honest. They give a crap about individuals. And so the point of having a trademark is to basically differentiate between brands so that the consumer is less likely to get confused between products and therefore end up with an inferior product when they think they're buying a brand name when they're not. So that's the purpose of a trademark. It's to differentiate products so that it doesn't confuse the customer. And so with that, each of the registered trademarks actually has to be associated with a goods category. It can be associated with more than one, but there has to be like a primary category that it's associated with. So you can't just have a trademark that's for a term and you have that term in every single industry, every single possible product out there. It has to be attached to a very specific goods category. So for instance, if Moda owns the term jelly roll, that refers to fabric goods, right? 2.5-inch strips. You could have a sock company and have, sell a bundle of goofy socks all rolled up in a ball, kind of like a jelly roll, and call it a jelly roll because it's a clothing industry. It's a totally different goods category, and that would not be trademark infringement, right? Same term, different products, different categories, different goods. That's okay. Trademarks have to be associated with a specific goods category. And the last thing here that you need to remember with trademarks is that it is not a complete embargo on the term. The company that has registered the trademark does not have the right to prohibit from anybody else from ever using that term ever speaking it, ever writing it, ever publishing it. Like, they don't have an embargo on that term. What they do have is the ability to prevent another company from naming a similar product that term. That's it. Right? And this comes back to that reducing the likelihood of confusion. We don't want to confuse consumers by having two products in the same category named the same thing, because then it's hard to figure out which one belongs to which brand. And so you can't be sure of which good you're getting. That's the whole point of a trademark, is to differentiate between those two things. What it doesn't prevent you from doing is using the term to refer to that product, even if you're not part of the company. Okay? So you as a designer are perfectly free to use that term in your quilt pattern to refer to precuts in the fabric requirements, right? If your pattern requires a jelly roll, requires, 36 or 42 2.5-inch strips, you're perfectly free to say, hey, the fabric requirements for this type of fabric is a jelly roll, because you're referring back to that product that Moda has made. Yeah, you might not be specifically saying you must use Moda fabric. It could be just like generally a bundle of 2.5-inch strips. That's fine. The term has become so ubiquitous in the industry that it's kind of like Kleenex versus tissue, right? A lot of people just call everything a Kleenex, even if it's made by, an off-brand or Puffs or any of the other tissue brands out there. And that's just because they've done their branding really well. That's a sign of really good branding. But it's so ubiquitous at this point that most quilters are going to recognize jelly roll better than they are 2.5-inch strips. And so using that term in your quilt pattern is perfectly fine, and it's encouraged, because what you're doing is not using it to name a similar product a trademark term. You're using it to refer to that thing that has already been named by the trademark, by the company that made the trademark. It's totally fine. So a lot of people get a little bit worried when they hear this. They're like, I don't know, that still doesn't really sound right. So I like to kind of illustrate this with an example. If you go on Amazon, or you're buying like a phone case from OtterBox, which is a really, really well-known company that makes really tough phone cases, you go on there and you're trying to find a phone case, right? And you go to the description and it says, compatible with iPhone 10, iPhone 12, right? Like whatever model you have, maybe it's compatible with Samsung Galaxy, Google Pixel 3, like, all of the big phone brands and names, those are all trademark terms. OtterBox, or the random seller from China on Amazon, is not asking these companies for permission to use that term. They don't need to. It falls under fair use because they're not naming a similar product in a similar goods category with that name. They're referring to the product that is actually under the trademark from the company that trademarked that name. Fair use is a term that's actually talked about a lot in kind of trademark and patent law, and it's protected legally because they understand that the point of a trademark, again, is not to embargo the term. It's not to prevent anybody from ever speaking it ever. It's to improve this kind of brand recognition and reduce the likelihood of confusion for the consumer. And so if you are actually referring to that product, even if you're not affiliated or associated with the company that trademarked the good at all, it's still fair use to use that term because you need to communicate to the customer that you are talking about that specific good. It's the exact same thing in the quilt pattern industry. It's absolutely no different. It's fair use, and you should not be worried at all about using jelly roll, layer cake, all of these different trademark pre-cut names in your quilt patterns. It's totally fine, and I would actually encourage it because it sparks something in your consumer to be like, oh, I have a jelly roll that I bought 6 months ago. I can use it for this pattern. That's awesome. Now, occasionally you will hear a story within the quilting industry of somebody that's actually reached out to Moda or one of these other companies and asked about this, right? Are you okay with me using this term? And depending on the company, they might get a different answer. Moda, from what I've heard, is generally like, yeah, go for it. We don't care. Other companies sometimes have a different opinion. I had one ghostwriting client that was working on a pattern that used AccuQuilt dies, and she wasn't sure about this and just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. And so she actually reached out to her contact with AccuQuilt. She's been an affiliate with them for a while and asked this question. They were like, no, we only want our sanctioned patterns to actually refer to our systems in their patterns. We don't want you using it. Fair enough, right? Any company can request anything, but what you need to understand is they don't actually have a legal right to prevent you from using their trademark terms when you're referring to that specific product. they have no legal basis at all, right? And so what I see a lot in the quilting industry, especially with kind of these smaller companies that don't have in-house legal support, is that, maybe they farmed out their trademark registration, and now that all of that's finished, they're basically just using them how they perceive them to be used. They don't actually understand fully the difference between kind of patents and trademarks and all of these different legal kind of structures that exist. And so any company is well within their right to ask you, hey, we'd prefer you not to do this, but it is up to you whether or not you actually want to comply with that. And if you don't, there's absolutely nothing they can do about it because it's not a legal basis. They don't have a right to embargo you using the term when you're talking about their product. They just don't. It's fair use and it's protected by law. Now, the only case where you would not want to use kind of these trademark precut terms is if you happen to be writing a pattern for a specific fabric line that is from a company that's not Moda, right? So if you're writing a pattern that's going to go with a fabric line for Riley Blake, it's releasing with their fabric line, they're going to promote it. You cannot refer to the precuts from that specific product line that is not Moda as layer cakes and all of these things. That would be trademark infringement because now you're referring to a specific fabric line from a specific company that is not Moda, because you'd have the same term from two different companies used for two similar products in the same goods category. That is exactly the definition of trademark infringement. So that's kind of the only time I would strongly recommend you not use it. But that's kind of a very unique case. If you happen to do a lot with different fabric manufacturers, you're definitely going to want to use the terms that they're using for their precuts, or just generically call it, 10-inch squares, 2.5-inch strips, something along those lines. Those are perfectly fine too. But if you can use kind of these ubiquitous terms that quilters recognize in your pattern, if you're writing it for precuts, just kind of in a general sense, you're not writing it for a specific fabric line, I would use them because, again, Moda's done very, very well to kind of get this brand recognition and ubiquitousness in their kind of precut terms within the quilting industry, and you can use that to your advantage if you're a quilt pattern designer and kind of spark those like, oh, this is precut friendly. Oh, I can go dig that jelly roll out of my bin. Oh, I have that 10-inch square from 5 years ago of this fabric line I love. I can use it for this pattern. It sparks that recognition, and that can really help you sell the pattern as well. Alrighty, that's all I've got for today. If you found this video helpful, make sure you like and subscribe. And anytime you see this question come up within the quilting industry, feel free to jump in and say, hey, that's not right. You are actually perfectly okay to use that term. It's just fine. Let's stop being afraid of these things. I don't ever want you to be afraid to publish your pattern because of legal repercussions or just the unknown, especially when it's rooted in misinformation. I hate that. So let's kind of dispel this rumor when you see it come up. Now you know better. Spread the word.